to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Peak. Will Councilmember Peak report to the council chamber? I wanted to start with him. Councilmember Peak.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Funk.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Darez.
Here.
Mayor Barbeau.
Here.
And Councilmember Newsom will be absent.
Correct. Okay, and we will just make note when we return from closed session that roll call has already been taken. Okay, we are going to go into closed session to discuss the items listed on the agenda. I will ask the city attorney to now announce the closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And prior to doing that, I'll just note that there's no one in the audience for public comment on the closed session itself, but the closed session will be conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 subdivision D4 in one potential case.
Okay, thank you. And as noted, there's nobody here for public comment, so we will now recess into closed session and we will return at our regularly scheduled time for open session at 6 p.m. Okay, good evening. We're going to call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Atascadero City Council. The council has returned from closed session. We already took roll prior to entering into closed session, so if the clerk would note that all council members are here except for Councilmember Newsom, who is out. We will proceed then to the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led this evening by myself. So please stand if you are able and join me in saluting our nation's flag. Pledge allegiance. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. If you're here in the chambers or listening through one of the many avenues that we make available to folks, thank you for your participation. We're going to move on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of items that are considered routine and non-controversial by city staff and will be acted upon in a single action unless a member of the council wishes to pull an item for separate consideration. And we will allow public comment on consent calendar items. So first, let me ask if any of my colleagues would like to pull an item or have a question of staff. Okay, seeing none, we'll go out and see if there's any public comment on the consent calendar. Go ahead and please approach the podium.
If I'm not correct, please let me know and I can do this in public comment. I have a question on our last meeting on the Del Rio project, and I believe that's still on the consent calendar as a reading, but I couldn't find a number tonight.
I don't see Del Rio itself as an item unless you're considering it as, yeah, I don't, and it's not part of
Okay,
the.
I'll do it in public comment. Thanks.
Yes, that'd be great. Do it in community forum. Thank you. Okay, anybody else wishing to approach and make comment on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for a motion on the consent calendar.
Move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Funk, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Darez. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Funk,
Yes.
Councilmember Peak,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Darez,
Yes.
Mayor Barbeau.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Okay, we will move on to community forum and I'm sorry, not to community forum, updates from the city manager. And our city manager had to step out to scholarship night at the high school. One of his children is getting at least one scholarship. So well, congratulations to him and to her. And we will have a report by our deputy city manager, Laura Henderson.
And yes.
Name change. So
Thank you, Council.
yeah, so good.
And good evening, everyone. Hopefully everyone has seen some of the work that's going on in the city. We officially broke ground on the first phase of our public facilities project. This has been a huge 6-year undertaking for much longer than that, but 6 years of planning and community collaboration. We broke ground at both Fire Station 2 and the police department. We will be having a public groundbreaking event on June 8th at Fire Station 1. That'll be at 3 p.m. The public is invited to that. So if everyone wants to come out, we'd love to see you there. This project, is delivering modern energy efficient facilities that strengthen emergency response, support future growth, and improve the health and safety for our fire and police personnel. This project includes renovations to Fire Station number 2, and a brand new police dispatch building at PD, as well as some improvements to our police department, and a brand new Fire Station 1 administration building for our fire department, as well as a dedicated emergency operations center. This first phase, which is Fire Station 2 and PD, is a major milestone that improves delivery, operational efficiency, and coordination among our public safety teams. We're really, really, really excited about this project. And again, we welcome all of the public to join us on June 8th at 3 p.m. for our groundbreaking event at Fire Station number 1. A new fire engine has arrived. Speaking of public safety, a new fire engine has arrived. We ordered this fire engine in July of 2023, and we just received it a couple weeks ago. They celebrate our fire and emergency services department celebrated the arrival of what's called, it's the 2026 Pierce Enforcer 2,000 gallon per minute pumper. Pretty impressive. It's a multi-purpose heavy-duty fire truck designed to suppress fires, transport firefighters, and carry critical rescue equipment. This will serve as the department's primary frontline response vehicle. And you'll probably notice this one looks a little different. It has a Atascadero gray on the engine. The weed abatement is still ongoing. Please, please, please remember that weeds need to be abated by June 1. That is the deadline. This is mandatory. So please, if you have not already, please make sure you get out there and get those weeds abated. For more information about wildland fire preparation and our weed abatement requirements, please visit atascadero.org/fire. You can see on this about the weed abatement cutting guidelines and where we would like to see the vegetation clearance. Our 10th annual Showdown Cornhole Tournament is coming. That's actually scheduled for Saturday, June 6th. RSVPs need to be in by May 30th. 8 a.m. is check-in time, and bags start flying at 9:30 a.m. Make sure you come out to join everyone for a day of friendly competition, delicious food, and plenty of fun. Whether you're a seasoned cornhole pro or just in it for the laughs, this is definitely your event. This year's event will be hosted by the Builders Exchange of the Central Coast, and you can find out more information at visitatascadero.com/events. Also upcoming is the 23rd annual Ice Cream Zoofari. Tickets are currently on sale. The event will happen Saturday, June 6th from 5 to 8 p.m. It's always a magical summer evening with all-you-can-eat ice cream, sundaes, toppings, and just sharing time with all of the animals. Tickets, again, are available for purchase in person at the Central Coast Zoo. Ticket sales do include full zoo admission and unlimited sweet treats. Please make sure you're marking your calendars and saving the date for the Atascadero Lakeside Wine Fest. The Wine Fest will be June 13th from 4 to 8 p.m. This is, once again, another unforgettable summer experience here in the city. It's a premier event showcasing wineries from the Central Coast that include nearly 250 wines from over 60 of our local wineries. Please make sure you get your tickets. Those are on sale today. And summer movies in the park are coming as well. Those start June 13th at 7 p.m. You'll get to experience your favorite movie with your family and friends under the stars. It's free to attend, and these are hosted at Colony Park Community Center at 5599 Traffic Way. There's the movie, games, activities, and more that happen before the movie. And please make sure you bring a low back chair so you don't block other people's view, or a picket blanket. Second year of our aquatics program. Registration is now open. You can register for swim lessons online at atascadero.org, or you can go in person to the Colony Park Community Center. Swim passes for lap swim and free swim must be purchased in person at the Colony Park Community Center or once aquatics begins at the Atascadero High School pool. Again, please remember for your swim passes, those do need to be purchased in person. For more information, you can call 805-470-3360 or visit our website. And that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, please let me know. And as a reminder, all event information for city and city-sponsored events, the zoo, and things to do, go to visitatascadero.com. And for all city-related business, atascadero.org. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Question for you. The movies, they used to be in the Sunken Gardens, and for a couple of years, we've had them at the community center. Are they inside at the community center, or are they outside?
No, they are outside.
They're outside.
Yes,
Okay.
they are
so
outside.
Okay. Same idea though, inflatable screen and
Yeah,
all
same
that.
idea. Mhm.
Okay, gotcha. Does any other member of the council have any questions for the deputy city manager? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on now to community forum. And community forum is reserved for those persons wishing to address the city council on any matter that is not on the agenda, but over which the council has jurisdiction. The Brown Act prohibits the council from entering into a discussion or discussing matters not on the agenda, although we may at our discretion ask staff to contact a speaker or ask staff to give a quick answer to a question. So speakers have 3 minutes, and we'd ask you to state your name for the record.
My name is Richard Moen, living here in Atascadero, and I do have something kind of coattailing on your number 3 item on the road improvements and stuff, but it deals with driver safety. I've noticed as I have matured in age that driving at night becomes a little bit more of a hazard for me, especially when some of our newer vehicles come with multi-lights, yellows, greens, reds, you name it, they have it. There's one truck that is made that uses 4 headlights for their low beams. Extremely difficult to see. That white line on the side of the road has become a lifesaver for me. When I see these cars coming with their mini lights, I immediately find that white line. I notice that on Portola, there are parts of it that have a white line and parts of it that don't have white lines. One of the parts that I'm looking at that doesn't have a white line, there's probably a 4 or 5 inch drop. So if someone were to miss that, go off the road, I don't see how they could safely get back on the road. So I know you've got your proposed budget for this year for roads, but I would really encourage the city to think of their community and maybe add this to it this year. Go through, put on the major roads. I'm not talking about the little, roads, but the major roads, your Portola, Atascadero Avenues, Santa Lucia, like that. And add these white lines to the side of the road. They are vitally important for people who don't drive as much as they used to at night. Also, there are places where the dirt has come in and covered the white lines. I think that's something that could be done on a regular maintenance, going through and cleaning those lines off so the public can see them. So that's my major concern for that, is just public safety for driving for seniors and new drivers that can't quite navigate those multicolored headlights that we have out on our road. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, council, city staff, Jeff Oslin. Hope everybody had a great Memorial Day. I personally want to thank Jim Lewis and his family for putting the flags up as he has taken over, doing that from, go ahead, Mayor.
No, I just want to please don't leave the chamber. I'm going to comment to you something. So please don't leave the chamber. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr.
Sure. Again, I want to thank Jim Lewis and his family for doing the flags. It used to be done by Ron Allen, and it was great that we're still doing that. On a personal note, on a couple other things, last meeting we approved the Del Rio study for the intersections and things of that nature. And just have a crazy question because it was mentioned by the director that the possible competitive bid was within range of what we approved Wallace Group their money for. And my real concern is why wouldn't Wallace be extremely cheaper? They have all the records, they've done all the traffic studies, they have everything. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I'm just curious why they're not $50,000 less than what somebody else would bid on. So that's that. On the other one is I mentioned about a supermarket on the north side of town that's fairly new. I've brought it up several times. I'm bringing it up again. I would like to personally know if anybody has made contact with the landlord to enforce our code, which is 7 a.m. deliveries, not 6, not 5 a.m. My understanding is no contact has been made. I'd like to know if that's happened or not. It's still occurring. Home Depot stopped right away, right after that meeting. Trucks aren't idling. They're not offloading till 7. It's amazing. So as one that's going to live by Barrel Creek, if that ever comes to fruition, I want to know what good it is if we have codes that we're not enforcing. No different than like an Airbnb having a noise complaint at 1 a.m. and we choose not to do anything about it, or we say it's a civil matter. I think that is incorrect, and we need to fix that. Otherwise, maybe contractors should start doing their contracting things all over the neighborhoods at 4 a.m. What's the difference? Thank you.
Okay, anybody else wishing to speak at community forum? Okay, seeing no one, I've now asked Mr. Hayes, our Deputy Public Works Director, if you could get together with the gentleman and maybe identify some other specific roads he's referring to and explain perhaps there may be a reason why there isn't a white line everywhere. Because what I've learned over the years is our public works folks have a lot of expertise, and there are sometimes very good answers as to why we don't have crosswalks everywhere and why this, that, and the other things. So sometimes there's a very good answer, and if you could get together with him and get his contact information, that would be great. And Mr. Dunsmore, if you could get together with Mr. Oslin and answer his particular question regarding the premature deliveries at the new supermarket.
Yes, and if I can just add to that a little bit, I think we go through a very similar scenario with every new large business that opens in the city. With Home Depot, I think we spent several years trying to wrangle in their deliveries, and we're starting that process now with Valley Fresh and the Del Rio Marketplace, and I'll be meeting with them this week. I just haven't done that yet, and I spoke with Jeff Austin at length about this just last week.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. We will move on now to our next agenda item, which is item G1, a management report regarding our 2045 Atascadero General Plan Environmental Impact Report. And I believe I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Dunsmore.
Thank you, Council, and good evening. And looks like it's a really popular item tonight, but I assure you, it's very interesting discussion, and it's a necessary part of any significant policy update. We have to comply with CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. This particular undertaking, developing this environmental impact report draft, has been a very substantial undertaking. We've had a lot of help from our legal team. Dave's team here has done a tremendous effort putting, the screen just went black on me there, putting together comments with this, and SWCA has been the consultant leading the effort on drafting this document as a sub-consultant to MIG. Where's the, I have my little thing. Here we go. All right. So I'm going to kind of give some background about the basics of CEQA. I'll talk about what this EIR does and what the next steps are. The EIR draft is out now. We have copies out available to the public at the public library, one at our counter, one on the website. So it's definitely out there. What I like to show you often, you've seen this little map before. It's our process map, and we're getting so close to the end. We're almost there. We published the general plan itself. We published the general plan map. And we've done all this work that's given us the ability, bing, there goes that arrow, to be able to develop this draft program EIR, which will result in a final EIR. And essentially tonight, the intent of tonight is to be able to gather comments from the public, gather comments from the council, and those comments can keep coming in all the way up until next Thursday, June 4th. People can comment on either the adequacy of what we've covered. They can address typo errors in this document. It's a significant document. Just the document itself is roughly 900 pages. Then there's the appendices. There's a lot that goes into this. Many consultants working together. But essentially, the reason we have to do all this, we have to demonstrate that we've analyzed impacts on the environment. We have to demonstrate disclosing that to the public. So what this process really is disclosure. It's about telling people what the potential things are that could happen. Again, I mentioned just a moment ago, I'll mention it again, public comment ends June 4th. That'll complete 45 days of it being out there for public review. What CEQA, basically this framework of what this EIR does, it identifies 3 levels of different potential impacts. The screen's doing some funny things tonight, isn't it, Abby? She's got some wires that she's plugging in there. We'll fix that. That's okay. But anyway, there's what's called class 1, class 2, and class 3 impacts. Class 1, essentially, you deem not to be significant. Class 2 may be significant, but you can put in place mitigation or conditions that can reduce that level of significance. Then there's class 3. I'm doing it the other way around, aren't I? Because I didn't have the screen. Let me just start over again. Class 1 is significant and unavoidable. No matter how much you mitigate that, you're going to have a potential impact. Class 2 can be significant, but you can mitigate yourself out of it. You can put in conditions that alleviate that. And then class 3 is a less than significant. I needed that guide on the screen to show me. So also a basic golden rule of CEQA is that impacts, you need to try and mitigate them to the greatest extent feasible. It means you have to put in place mitigation that your consultants, your background analysis demonstrates is the best you can do. Is the council screen going black too as well? Okay, so it's not just me. All right, so I apologize for my little pause there. In this case, we worked not only with the applicant team to identify mitigation in response to the city goals and meet state requirements, but we've also looked at this in the aspect of the development of our community. We don't want the process here to be an undue burden. The whole idea of this new general plan and this new zoning that we're adopting in accompanying with this general plan is to make development easier to do in the community, more logical, and in the right places that reduce the environmental impacts without having to go through significant other processes. Now, there's certain things we still have to do, and there's certain declarations we have to make with this EIR. And I'm going to go over some of those things. But even no matter how hard we try, there's some impacts that remain significant even with mitigation because we cross certain state thresholds and there's certain best management practices from state agencies. I will tell you that this general plan, the General Plan 2045, is far more environmentally friendly than our existing general plan. We make great strides in reducing vehicle miles traveled, VMT, because we're adding more mixed use and adding more residential close to commercial and adding more jobs-based land uses in our community. And with that comes reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and reductions in air quality impacts. However, in those particular areas, we still cross these thresholds and we still have to identify that these are class 1 impacts, which are called significant and unavoidable. No matter how much we mitigate, we're not going to get there unless we do nothing. And if we do nothing, we will not survive as a community. And now I will also understate this by saying we made some pretty big assumptions and we essentially overestimated our population in our city. We're probably not going to grow quite to the extent that we estimate in this 2045 general plan. And we do that so that we cover our bases and we're very conservative with our numerical estimates. And we, have in place plans that can get us there. Now, I'm going to treat this a little bit like a podcast, and maybe let's talk to Kelly and ask her what she thinks about geology. What do you think about geology and the Class 2 impacts there, Kelly?
I love geology. We have a lot of different soils types in the city of Atascadero. It's very unique. But our impact mostly relates to paleontological resources. And so that is a required question that we have to ask ourselves during the CEQA process. And there was a mitigation measure that was identified to reduce our impacts to paleontological resources. And so that was to require a study of people that are proposing to do certain levels of development within areas that have soils types identified to potentially have paleontological resources. So this is a map of those soils areas within the city. You can see that they follow some of our alluvial areas along creeks and some of our low-lying areas. This study is a study that can be defined in certain ways to really hone in on those activities that need to be mitigated. So we can go through and work more with a consultant to say, is there a certain depth that those resources might be at? And if you're excavating less than that depth, you probably don't require a study. So this does give us some leeway to truly hone in on what those impacts are that need to be mitigated and what development potential is out there that does not need to be under this area of study because there is not going to be a potential impact to those resources. Another area that was identified to have a potential impact was to our utilities and specifically to our wastewater collection system and treatment facility. So I think you're all aware that our main treatment facility is proposed to go through some major upgrades in order to handle additional future capacity. But we do also have a wastewater collection system, the network of pipes and all those things under the street that also will need some work as time moves forward. We don't believe we're at that spot yet with any particular area, but we do want to be cognizant of some of those limitations as we move forward. And so there was a mitigation measure identified that would allow us to look at each individual project and ensure that we have adequate capacity prior to approving a project. Wait for the screen to come back up so you guys don't miss anything fun. So this slide is air quality, and this is our Class 1 impact. So even with identified mitigation measures, we are still above certain state thresholds. And again, that's okay because we're making a finding that that is okay, that we have identified and implemented all feasible mitigation measures, and that we understand that projects will not be able to go to the nth degree for mitigation, or that we're not going to inhibit certain growth in the city in order to meet some of those thresholds just by the nature of how our region and our city operates. So you can see there's a lot of air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, and transportation level impacts that all feed into greenhouse gas emission impacts and impacts to vehicle miles traveled, which is VMT. So greenhouse gas emissions comes from things like travel and cars, and VMT, vehicle miles traveled, from a statewide perspective, looks to limit the distance between where people live and where people work so that the miles spent in a single-use vehicle are limited to the greatest extent possible in order to then have better impacts on greenhouse gas emissions. So let me put my glasses on to read the little screen. So for greenhouse gas emission impact number 1, there were 3 identified mitigation measures that could be incorporated in order to reduce impacts, just not below the given threshold. That is updating the city's climate action plan and including some measures in there that talk about the things that we already do a lot of in terms of our maintaining our native urban tree canopy and things of that nature. Incorporating new development standards to promote the use of public transit. A lot of that is also required by building code, and some of our multifamily objective design standards that we recently adopted do require some connections to the sidewalk and create walkable environments. So we're already doing a lot of those things as well. The next is to incorporate a general plan policy to participate in SLOCOG's regional transportation plan and sustainable communities strategy, which is something that the city does anyways, but it's stated out loud in this document as a guiding framework to continue those efforts. So in terms of our class 1 impact, there are thresholds that are specifically set by the state for greenhouse gas emissions and VMT. And regardless of what we do in a city of 26.2 square miles, 26.1, there is not much that we can do to really get below that 15% VMT reduction that the state is looking for. We have a semi-rural and suburban community. We are in a region where people travel for work and we have major job centers. Having said that, this particular general plan does do better than our existing general plan. We focus heavily on infill development, which will help reduce some of those vehicle miles traveled and help support future public transit as we have sort of critical mass of population adjacent to our major corridors. And we have a lot of policies focused on improving our jobs housing ratio. So creating those areas that could be more job centric and industry centric areas. Again, as Phil mentioned, our population estimates are a little bit more forgiving than some of the SLOCOG modeling and state modeling. And that, again, allows us flexibility in analyzing future projects so that we can streamline as much as possible when projects that support our city goals come before us. Next steps. We're at our draft environmental impact report. Done, written. You can come see it anytime. Draft fiscal analysis, which informs the general plan, but is slightly separate, will come to you in your June meeting this year. And then we're at our grand finale of plan adoption in the fall of this year, after we've responded to all of the environmental impact report comments and have made any final edits to the general plan. So we're here. It's been a journey, and we're at the finish line. And I believe that concludes our presentation. That's a QR code to our website up there where you can continue to make comment. You can also review our environmental document on that website and on the city's website. And you can come view physical copies at City Hall and the Atascadero Library if you so need to. And that concludes our presentation. We are available if you have any questions.
All right, thank you very much. And I got to say, I thank you also for the hour I spent this morning with you. I did peruse, went through all 1,000 or so pages of this. I can't say I read them all. Probably read a couple hundred of them, but and to be honest, quite frank, it's very confusing. There's a lot of repetition and redundancy, as they might say. Things are mentioned over and over again in different contexts, and I realize that's all part of what's required in the way an EIR is done. It's a shame that the state requires them to be put together in such a long-winded fashion. But I thank you for answering my questions. So I will not have any specific questions this evening. I might have a few more comments. So I'm going to turn over my colleagues, but I want to note, as I understand the process here, any comments and or questions that council asks will go into as part of the record regarding the record as far as this thing here this evening. Is that correct?
Yes, we do want to take comments. Yeah.
But the comments that we make at council will be documented as part of the process.
They will be documented, right? So questions, not necessarily, but any comments that you have for modifications or clarifications.
Okay. I just want to make sure my colleagues are aware of that. And hopefully you also had a chance to ask some questions ahead of time. But I'm going to begin on my left with Councilmember Peak with questions for staff.
Yeah, I have a question in regards to, it's page 32 of 48 on the staff report. In regards to GHG/MM 1.2, new development projects located along existing or planned public transit routes that require features that promote the use of public transit. We have one bus that goes through town, and I don't know if I've ever seen any other planned transit routes. So is this just filler words for, we don't have any planned, extra planned public transit routes, do we?
We don't have any extra planned at the moment. Again, this is a 25-year document. And so I know there are always talks with our public transit agencies to increase ridership and increase their reach, but none at the time.
So we're basically just, this would be just talking about impact report. If it doesn't exist yet, if anybody wants to build along a corridor that's not yet planned transit, but it becomes planned transit, and someone all of a sudden has property that they want to develop on, and their street in front of their house becomes, or in the front of their property becomes a planned public transit route, then their plans have to change. So beyond zoning, that like the frontage, the sidewalk, everything about it would have to be different, or the vague stuff like this in the long report are very it's just kind of just seems like it's just opening, just leaving the can open to like.
Yeah, and a lot of these general plan policies are sort of vague and broad for us for the reason that things change over time. A lot of transit supportive development includes higher density. It includes sidewalks and walkways that connect to the sidewalk. Generally, our entire frontage is available to the city and obviously our transit friends then for certain planned improvements like bus stops. And so we would not necessarily need to widen onto private development. And so a lot of the concepts that help support public transit are already integrated into our higher density multifamily projects.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Daris.
All right, just one quick question on the, if I can say it right, paleontological resources. On that map you had, there were several, I think it was all the yellow spots that was on there. So how were those areas identified? And what is going to determine whether or not additional studies are going to be required?
So in these cases, we rely on other professions, in this case, paleontologists, and they identify areas that have soil types that are conducive to prehistory resources, fossils left behind. And so these are a maybe. These not saying, hey, it's guaranteed that we're going to have paleontological resources, we're going to find dinosaur bones. It's the fact that we have layers of soil that are conducive to that. So they're asking for, hey, if there's a significant development project where you're going to excavate a significant area in these zones, you need to go through this check to see if you're going to have paleontological resources. So this is definitely a question. I think we had this question. We really tried to grill down on this with our consultants and say, is this really necessary? Is this way we can do it? But then we go back to CEQA, and CEQA says you've got to mitigate the best you can. So here we are. So I think it's definitely worthy of a comment from council.
So you said significant development, and some of these areas, the development that I see that's potential is maybe somebody's residence. Maybe that's on a 3 to 5 acre size lot. I don't know what size lots are. I think it was on Lomita. I saw part of that. So or near Lomitas anyway. So if somebody was, because when you do a house, you have to do a soils report. So you're going to dig down, you're going to find stuff. Is that going to require additional studying, and what does the additional studies entail?
We don't actually have the infinite details on that yet. And so it's been a question for us as well. We wanted to have our consultant weigh in on this particular one tonight. They weren't available for that. So.
All right, thank you.
Before I pass it on to Councilmember Funk, but you'd mentioned though that you were talking about deeper projects. So like if I'm digging a foundation for a single family home, that would not necessarily trigger this. Whereas if I'm digging, a huge retention basin for a commercial structure or something, there's a difference between 2 feet deep, 3 feet deep, and 12 feet deep, right? Because there's I think what we're worried about here is the potential for a huge cost being imposed on people, A, trying to build a single family residence, but B, also commercial property developers. Where's the outer edge of the limit on these things in terms of what can be imposed on property owner? That, your lot has soil type X, you've got to, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or something to dig it all up and make sure there's not a dinosaur bone there.
Yeah, and we have similar questions. So In talks with our consultant, our technical lead, in terms of implementation of this, right? So the general plan policy stays a little bit broad and large. And in terms of implementation, they do believe that there is a certain depth or a certain sort of size project that would not necessarily trigger an additional study. A lot of our single family residences do not go that deep with their foundations. There's recommendations of soils reports in terms of how much sort of over excavation you need to do. And sometimes it's not significant. And so really staff's goal as well is to limit these types of studies, really only when they are necessary and there could be a potential significant impact.
Thank you, because I think that's really the concern is it becomes very common nowadays to require, with this study and that study, and they all cost money and they all take time and they can kill projects. They can just flat out kill them because they go, I can't afford to do that. I'm not going to do the project. So that's our concern. So I'm glad to hear you state it in that fashion that we're trying to minimize them. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. You kind of reminded me of something. I have a follow-up question on that. When you purchase a home or a blank piece of property or whatnot, there's sometimes things that are part of that property that needs to be disclosed. The flood zone goes through the middle of the property, things like that. Is this kind of information, how will this get to the purchaser before they get to the point, say, I want to buy this property, I'm going to plan to develop it this way, they get so far and they get into it, and then these things come up, and as the mayor said, that it could potentially kill the project, but now they're knee deep into it. So how are people going to be forewarned that there could be a potential of additional studies required?
What we typically do with this kind of a map, with this mitigation, it has to ultimately get implemented into our zoning policy. So this map would have to get refined and the mitigation measure would have to get adopted into a zoning policy that adopts just like a flood zone map, just like these other sort of development boundaries that you have to implement them into your city codes so that when someone looks at a property and says, hey, what are my development restrictions? These things come up. Now, as I'm looking at this mitigation measure language too, it does have some flexibility in it. And it does talk about only being necessary in areas that haven't been previously excavated, and we also need to get some more investigation on what the depth is. So for an example, like if I'm going to be developing something on the Dove Creek site or Del Rio Marketplace site, these areas have been heavily graded and leveled and filled and modified. They're all historically done already. So those wouldn't be subject to that. Now, someone building a brand new, 3-story house on a steep hillside where it's vacant land, yeah, certainly that, they're going to excavate 20 feet down. That might be where this study is triggered. We don't yet even know what the extent of that study is, what it would cost, what it takes. Could be similar to an archaeological study, which is very inexpensive in most cases, unless they require follow-up monitoring. So this is definitely one that has a lasting implication that needs to be implemented through zoning, needs to be identified, and could potentially be one of these things that we have to follow up on. Now, looking at the map, a lot of those areas are previously developed, or they're not the prime development areas along the corridor of El Camino and 41, and in the triangle where we're increasing density, and the west side is primarily developed. It's kind of interesting locations where that is. Looks like it's mostly the northeastern quadrant and some on the southeastern quadrant there. It's all close to the river, which is interesting. And again, it's based on a soil type is what they...
Recorded soil types based on the developments that's happened in the past. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Funk.
Yes, I too have questions about these paleontological and for the sake of simplicity, is it okay if I oversimplify that and just, we're talking about dinosaur bones?
Prehistoric resources, which include dinosaurs. Yes.
Or could include very small fossils of ancient creatures of other types.
Yes.
Okay, so is it reasonable to assume that any place that human beings have decided to live on the planet, other beings have previously decided to live on the planet, at some point, and might have left bones or material?
That's called archaeology.
Yeah.
Which is historic, not prehistoric. Yes.
Right, okay, but, the critters have lived a lot of places that we've decided are useful for us too. Um, have there ever been any significant dinosaur bone finds in the city of Atascadero, to your knowledge?
I have not visited the Atascadero Natural History Museum where they have all the dinosaur bones. Haven't been able to find it yet.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not aware of any significant paleontological resources found in our community whatsoever. I'd be really curious if anybody is aware of that. I'm not aware myself, and I've lived here a very long time.
Sure. If we looked at these identified maps, if you looked at this statewide, are these kinds of soil strata and things that they're identifying as potential paleontological, places for dinosaur bones? Is this pretty widespread? Or are we somehow particularly distinctively having special spaces that might be valuable?
It's very widespread, and you'll see this throughout the entire county. And in fact, there's areas where you can see prehistoric resources on the surface. For example, if you go out to the Lopez Lake area, the back of Lopez Lake, where the river feeds into Lopez Lake, you'll see fossils all over the surface out there. And they consider those paleontological resources. And there's shell fossils inside rocks, and there's loads of them. We used to go there as kids and collect them. So that would be considered a paleontological resource. And so they're all over this county because we have these similar soil types and the similar geology in many areas. And basically what it is, it's old seafloor that's condensed and packed down. And it's a sandstone, kind of the really, really dense sandstone that's packed down. And that's where you see these fossil layers. And that's where they've determined that these are in these areas. So.
Right. Okay. I have nothing against dinosaur bones or, the fun of looking for fossils and all that, but I'm having real heartburn over the way this thing operates. If I understand it, am I correct in understanding that this is something that has been in state law for about 50 years? I think it's like 1976 that it was adopted into CEQA.
Yes, it was originally adopted into CEQA as one of the sections to be aware of and to comment on and to evaluate. Yes.
And then in the course of time, since we've had this requirement, something that might have been useful to say, let's make sure that nobody paves over the La Brea tar pits or something that's really valuable. Now you have areas all over the state that are being identified as potential resources. Is it also fair to assume that the technology has gotten better over time and is probably more able to find more little fossils and resources that could then have to be carefully extracted according to these, what does it say in here? The standards of the American Paleontological Society or whatever. Is assumed that we're able to find more of them now than maybe we were, in 1976?
Absolutely. Technology is enhanced substantially. And I think that so have geological reports and us doing soils reports, and we build foundations based on soil types in a much better way. We're looking up some information as to whether when paleontological resources were added to CEQA, it actually looks like it's a lot more recently. It looks like it was 2018 that the big change was done to add this as a significant factor. So we wouldn't have had this in our last general plan EIR when we did that back in 2002. So that's why we didn't have that mitigation. That's why this is sort of a brand new thing. But maybe there's a different way to look at the mitigation measure and hence the conditions that follow it on properties. And I think this is a valid comment to leave with the EIR, draft EIR, to see how this can be folded in a way that doesn't create an undue burden for each and every development. I'm not exactly sure this tonight how to word that, but
Sure.
that's a good topic.
But
And we are in draft form right now, so.
Yeah, okay. So you're saying would it be possible then potentially to scope this in a way that minimizes the number of properties that are susceptible so that, if there's a place or two that really might be amazing, we could allow for that, but that this, the faint potential that you might find a fossil someplace doesn't create the obligation for every single development in these things in these areas to have to make an assessment of how deep they're going to go, and how this compares to certain requirements of excavation. Is it sufficient? And then have a consultant who specializes in this, who does a report to certify that they have checked this, and create an opportunity for anybody who might, any neighbor who might not like the project, to then challenge them in the court on the basis of the fact that they didn't do a good enough paleontological report. Are we not setting up that whole scenario? And can we minimize it? Yeah, it's maybe that was a rhetorical question, but
Or was it a statement? Yeah. And so I think understood.
yeah. Okay. So I'll come back to this when we get to discussion, because I've a couple of thoughts about that. But yeah, enough already. The moving on to air quality. I noticed as I was going through Appendix C and some of the other wonderful online resources that all of the air quality tables seem to be county-wide data. Is it true that we don't really have the data to measure air quality impacts specific to Atascadero, and we're just looking at what we might change, at the extent to which, after we make our changes, the county as a whole would still exceed thresholds?
So we did pose this question of our consultant team, and they haven't been able to reach the technical consultant yet with the answer. I do know on a broader scale that sometimes citywide data doesn't have the same level of data integrity that countywide data has. And so in order to meet sort of the CEQA requirements for analysis, they need to use a larger data set. I don't know if that occurred in this specific situation. I do know it occurred in some of our energy modeling that was done, because citywide data is not as complete and it wasn't an effective data set to use.
Okay, because I routinely look at Atascadero's air quality using the app EPA or Air Now or whatever. There's an app on my phone that I use, and our air quality consistently is good, unless there's a major fire someplace that in the area blowing smoke at us. But if you look at air quality for the Nipomo Mesa in the south part of the county, which is downwind of agricultural activity and downwind of a fair amount of vehicular activity on the Oceano Dunes, that area, which is also part of our county and contributes to countywide numbers, they have bad air quality days all the time, and sometimes have among the worst air quality in the country. You'll hear that report. Aren't we being, if is everything we do still playing in a data set that includes those areas that have very different air quality characteristics?
Yeah, we can't answer on this specific situation because we don't have our technical analysts to weigh in.
Okay, just, it's just worth noting, if assuming that is true at some level, from the data that's shown on its face, it does appear that it sounds like we're creating worse impacts from this than maybe we actually are. That as you've clarified, that we're actually doing things that make our impact better. And we're doing the things that are within our city's control, but we can't control what's happening with ag land and OHV use in the South County, right?
Yeah, and we will add that the majority of the impact in the air quality section is greenhouse gas. So there's not a lot of other impacts in terms of just the standard pollutants in our air. There was sort of no feasible mitigation there, and there's air quality plans that are countywide, and so that's kind of the data set that they use. I think in the numerous times that Phil and I have seen EIRs come through for multiple projects within the county at large and the city, there's generally not been one where the air quality impact is less than significant. Even projects such as Barrel Creek always have an air quality impact simply because people drive cars. And so it is, while there might be, and we can clarify some of the data sets that were used and why they were used, it might have something to do with the level of threshold being a countywide and the plans being countywide. Therefore, we need to use countywide data. It is not uncommon to have air quality impacts across multiple ranges and sizes of projects.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, there's a limit to how much is in our control when we do the things that our city can do responsibly and well. Okay. Do you, to that regard, with regard to the vehicle miles traveled and the impact of the fact that if the community grows, there will be more cars and people will drive them. Just, even if we make it easier for some of them to work here so they drive less, they'll still drive cars. Do you know what mix of gas and electric vehicles the greenhouse gas numbers assume as we're modeling this? Does that trend over time? Or do we assume that it's a current mix of vehicles and we won't ever get any improvement in the number of electric cars people might drive?
I do believe, if I remember correctly from our consultant team, that they do build in a factor of increasing electric vehicles.
Okay, because that certainly will help over time, and those incentive policies are largely out of our pay grade. Okay, and then last on the wastewater capacity, just making sure that what we're dealing with here is essentially the sewer pipes and the lift stations, right? So that would be specific to capacity for an individual property. If they want to get building permits for the property, the sewer pipe has got to be big enough and the lift stations have to be big enough to accept the flow that would be generated by the project being envisioned, right?
Correct. And that's all very flow specific and it's very type of development specific. And we do have plans over the next 20 years, I think, if I'm looking at Ryan, to start upgrading and replacing some of those systems. And depending on size of development does some of those pieces as well. So that's why it's kind of a check-in on each project basis, because things are anticipated to change and be repaired over time.
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense. It is a requirement that we can't really get around. There's got to be you got to be able to handle that aspect of capacity. Okay, that'll do me for questions for now.
Thank you. I think we'll go out to public comment, and then we'll come back to see, we'll have council members, make any comments that they wish to make about this process.
Good evening, Council. Jeff Oz on one comment. Will this EIR also include the possibility of reclaimed water being piped from our sewage plant to other areas?
Seeing no other public comment, we'll close public comment. Can you address, it's interesting whether that sort of thing is part of the general plan or not. I don't know if it was assessed in the EIR at all regarding the wastewater comments.
It's not currently a discussion in the general plan or in the future zoning or in the EIR at this time. I know it's a discussion that a lot of cities have and our city has had, it's potential to utilize that water for refilling the Atascadero Lake, for example, which is a wonderful idea, but it's not something that's currently in one of the draft policies of the new general plan.
Yeah, I believe
but it doesn't have to be either, and it can be evaluated separately.
And it will be maybe part of the discussion as we move through the wastewater treatment plant.
Yes.
Discussion and process. So, okay, I'm going to bring it back for council member comments. I'll start again on my left, I guess, with Council Member Peak.
Is it typical for an analyst or someone who's helping us with the EIR not to show up to one of these meetings? Or is this like a rare occasion that they're just not here or nobody could come from their company?
They typically always show up to these particular, this is our only big public hearing on the EIR. We would strongly encourage our environmental consultant to be here, and they were not available.
Do they owe us a participation in this that we're not getting?
They, right now, they're out of budget. So they were not able to attend, unfortunately, and we did invite them. We had hoped that we would get an online presence of our consultant, and that's a conversation we're having.
This seems like a few questions could have been easily answered by.
Absolutely.
Well, I understand. I mean, we may also have, contractual issues in terms of funding being utilized, or time being utilized for corrections and those sort of things. So that may warrant, further discussion on your part and discussion with council, et cetera. But we're not going to solve that here, but it's a very good question. So any comments, any other comments you want to convey? Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Daris. Okay. Councilmember Funk, and then I have some closing comments on it.
Sure. A couple of things. First of all, something that's not in this plan directly, but is very consistent with the policies that are laid out here is what for me is my, blue sky dream for Atascadero. That's having us being when the technology gets ripe, us being the demo case for a self-driving electric trolley that runs up and down El Camino Real from one end of the city to the other, and then bops out to the community center and printery and on one side, and bops out to the lake park and zoo on the other to cover all of our major commercial areas connected in town, and make it a whole lot. Imagine 3 o'clock in the afternoon if half the high school kids and a third of the junior high jump on the trolley to go to someplace closer to home, or someplace where mom and dad work, or after school programs or whatever. There's just, all kinds of things can be facilitated with fewer trips and reduced vehicle miles travels if we had some kind of resource like that, which is very different than your standard, can we get another route of another run of the number 9 bus going through town sort of thing. This would be a whole different thing. So I think in the course of the 20 years that are envisioned in this plan, hopefully that day will come that we could pursue something that would, if the technology actually works, that would really be cool for this community and would allow us to be the special and connected community and be environmentally good as well. So I just want to put it out there that there are some options that we can have that will be, continue to be good. That the technology is not ready for us to make that part of a plan yet, but that day may come. So that would be my hope. And then the other thing that I wanted to come and talk about a little bit more is the dinosaur bone thing. This just drives me nuts because you can see where a well-intentioned requirement that is placed, to protect, some very special resources has become something that has a pretty broad spread and requires all kinds of projects to have to stop and hire a consultant and do a report and get, the special, stuff, and potentially create a project killing event. So there's risk that you might find something and have to do, you might find a few fossils and then have to do a really complex scientific process that just totally screws up the kinds of projects that we want people to be bringing to our community to help us move forward together. So I would hope that we could explore the possibilities that staff would look at. How can we do less of this, make it much more limited so that fewer people have to do this report, and then I'll come back in individual determination about fussing at the state level about having to do this in the first place. Because this is how we layer on costs and make it difficult to build stuff is, lots of really well-intentioned things that achieve secondary goals. And it just layers on like, a 18-layer cake, of costs, and it makes things too much. So that's my comment on that. And I'll come back to the legislative angle in the individual determination.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I would follow on that because, whether it's paleontological, resources or several other different things in general, the state is totally contradictory. They want us to allow for zone for housing. They want us to encourage the building of housing. And then they just put up impediment after impediment in terms of increased cost for doing housing and increased risk for doing housing, so that somebody embarks on something and then they find, some dinosaur bones or this or that or something else. And the state just constantly, writes laws that imposes costs and makes it more difficult to build anything, because they say they want to encourage housing to be built, but their actions say otherwise. And I agree with Councilmember Funk that we would ask staff to do what they can to minimize the impact of this on projects in terms of either the limiting the criteria in which it would apply, that sort of thing, because all of these things do just add costs. And I would also address, like, there's multiple mentions in here about our high priority towards the tree ordinance. And we live in a community that I would almost guarantee you has, thousands upon thousands upon thousands more trees than it did 50 or 100 years ago when this was established as an agricultural based community. And yet we act like, oh my God, somebody's going to build a house and they have to cut down a couple trees, that it's the end of the world. And I think that is based on very faulty reasoning. I look at my own property, which had 0 trees on it when we built, and now has, probably a couple hundred trees and probably several score of oak trees that, would fall under the ordinance if we were a commercial property. And it's just, there is so much overkill in this entire EIR and CEQA process that runs at cross purposes to the state's stated goals of encouraging housing. And we in Atascadero also want to encourage commercial development so that we have a better balanced city. One of the things that is a big problem in Atascadero is that jobs housing balance that staff referred to. We have a very low number of jobs compared to the amount of housing. We want to encourage jobs for a whole bunch of reasons, including revenue, but also so that our residents don't have to get in a car and drive to work in the morning over the hill. And if anybody actually truly cared about the environment, they would understand the importance of that, of having people stay in their community to work and then to shop and, get services, et cetera. But every time you turn around in this process, they just try to make it more difficult to build by extraneous requirements and repetitive requirements. And so it's very frustrating to me to go through this process. And we spent a lot of money for an EIR that is 100 pages of largely gobbledygook, quite frankly. But it's just part of the process that we're required to go through. And so, with that, I want to thank staff for all of the effort they've put into this. And I know that you understand that, council's desire in this is to try to make it easier for people to build things, because that's what we need to move forward as a community. So those are my comments. And I think that's about it. You guys have what you need from us. So,
We do. Thank you.
okay. All right. Thank you. So with that, that was our only major item. We will move on to council announcements and committee reports. And I'll start on my right with Councilmember Funk.
Okay, I attended a meeting of the Homeless Services Oversight Council last week, and we approved some additional grants that are routine in terms of elements of funding. The way homeless services funding is done is endlessly complicated, with the money coming from multiple state and federal and other programs. each of which has its own requirements and scope and timing and so forth. And this is all trying to be squeezed through a county purchasing process model, which really fits that badly. And we are trying to really work systematically at how you think about overall funding requirements. So the next large set of funding requirements that come up will have geographic minimums as well, and this one this one also did. But so that that this critical services are available in each part of the county to people who are in those parts of the county, as well as performance-based awards that are based to who's getting the best results. That you know, they get more money than when there's not enough to go around. But that there are these needs in all parts of the county, and they're strong and capable providers in all parts of the county. So that's you know what HSOC's working on. I also attended along with a number of staff members and the mayor the SLO roundtable hosted by Economic Development Roundtable hosted by REACH last week, and that was a very interesting discussion that with folks, you know, nothing truly path breaking, but I passed a couple of ideas along to staff for things that we might be able to work on.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Daris.
Thank you. Last week, APCD met, Air Pollution Control District. Number of things we went over. They're trying to get a grant, and I think they're going to be successful on it. It's about $80,000 to be able to provide low-income families that qualify with a voucher to buy an e-bike for hopefully to cut down on energy costs for them to get around town and to work and whatnot. The vouchers would be up to $2,000, and there's specific e-bikes that would qualify for that. Some of these ones that these kids are riding that go 40, 50 miles an hour, they're not even legal in California, I guess, but those aren't going to be the ones that's going to be part of it. But it's about the environment and the footprint and everything. The other thing is that continuing to fund the engine replacement program for tractors and marine vessels. I think they have around $900,000 available. Individuals that qualify can get up to $125,000 to replace an engine, but that wouldn't cover the whole thing. It's up to 75%. The other thing is probably one of the more complicated things that APCD is dealing with is up until for the last several years, the county has been taking care of their payroll. They're not going to do that anymore. So they have to transition to a contractor that's going to do that. So we've approved their selection of that. And the main thing is the software that is used in-house has to change. And anybody that's ever changed platforms from one type of software to another knows how complicated that can be. So that was a big deal. And they've got about 6 months to get that complete. And and then finalizing or agreeing on their budget for the remainder of the year, I believe it was. So anyhow, it was a busy meeting, even though most of the supervisors that are there, all 5 of them were on it. 4 of them were out at a meeting in Sacramento, but we did have a quorum, so it was still good. So thanks.
Thank you. How many staff does APCD have when you talked about changing HR systems?
Man, that's a good question. I for some reason I think in the 50s. I mean,
okay.
I think it's somewhere in the 50s. I think.
Okay, because I would just say, you know, the IWMA had to change similarly, you know, handling of payroll, and we've been through multiple iterations of contractors trying to find the right solution. So it could be painful, I'm telling you.
It was a difficult search for them, and I think the most painful part is going to be for staff that's using it, which is only going to be 3 or 4 people in-house. But to learn software that does what it does, if you know anything about Excel, people know it at the 1 or 2% level. or QuickBooks and stuff like that. If you really want to learn it in depth, it's like learning AutoCAD. It's insane. And as soon as you have a question, if there's not somebody you can tap on the shoulder, it becomes extremely frustrating. So I wish them a lot of luck in that because it can be very difficult.
Thank you. Councilmember Peak.
Yeah, I went to 2 events this weekend that were just great. The Sip and Shop was a fantastic, a lot of business action downtown. It seemed to be the happening place to be Friday night. Memorial on Monday was fantastic. It was a great, just a great homage to the fallen soldiers of this country, and just a great event all around. I also want to just was very happy this weekend that everywhere around me and anywhere I rode my bike or went for a run, people were weed whacking. So they're getting ahead of that fine and keeping our community safe. And we got one more weekend, but the cacophony was a welcoming noise. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Yes, I spent several hours, not several hours, but more than 1 hour weed eating this weekend myself. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Let's see, at the IWMA meeting in Integrated Waste Management Authority, we actually declined to accept a grant from the APCD for a charging station. The $80,000 cost seemed extremely excessive to the board, as well as the taking up of a couple of parking spots, a very limited number there. So that was kind of interesting. You don't hear that or do that often in terms of declining to take a grant, but the board did on about a 7-1 vote. And let's see, I think that's all I had committee-wise. Yeah, we had the mayor's meeting here in Atascadero the previous Friday, and we had a discussion, we had a presentation by the SLOCOG staff regarding the next iteration of RHNA, or Regional Housing Needs Assessment or allocations. And it's interesting, the state is looking at more than doubling the regional housing needs allocation to our county. And our county is one of the first ones, our COG is one of the first ones in the state to go through this next iteration. And of course, they have a very convoluted way of kind of estimating what they think our county should accommodate in terms of new housing. And that means that we, of course, as individual jurisdictions will ultimately be allocated a number that we will have to zone for. That doesn't mean they'll get built, but that we will have to zone for. So that there's going to be an interesting discussion on that as time goes on. So that's all I have. Does any council member have an individual determination? Councilmember Funk.
I do, arising from our discussion today, that the dinosaur bone thing just really ticks me off that we're having to deal with this. And it's such a perfect example of the ways in which well-intentioned things that, at one point aimed in one direction, create this layer cake of additional costs and obligations that affects all kinds of unrelated projects and make it tough to build the housing. So, you got to choose between housing for the young people of our community so that they have a future here, and so we can have a workforce for our businesses that make us grow. And, some maybe missing out on a few old fossils someplace. I'm with the kids. I would like it, and I sense that we have a lot of agreement on that in the council. So I would just like to see, this is something that I would like to bring up with our elected representatives at the state level, and who I do get to see from time to time at events. And I would love to be able to speak on behalf of our entire council in saying that we would appreciate them taking a second look at that particular requirement and similar requirements, because it makes it very hard if they're going to ask us to zone for twice as much housing. If somebody's going to actually build that housing, we need to make it workable.
So, we have a legislative platform, and I certainly agree with you, and certainly would love to have you or any of us that speaks with our state legislators about our frustrations as cities with these kinds of things that the state legislature comes up with. Many times they come up with them, and years go by, they become more and more of a burden and more of an impediment, and they never seem to take something away. They always add more requirements. They never seem to take something away. They add more reporting requirements, and you generate reports that nobody reads, et cetera. As far as, representing all of us, you probably have a consensus on that thought process. I'm looking to council and or the deputy city manager. You don't see any problems with any one of us who's in conversations with, verbal conversations with our elected state representatives of expressing that opinion?
No, I think you guys have your approved legislative platform.
Right.
You know what that stands for, where that falls within what the council feels. And so expressing how you as an individual council member feels or how that states, yes, I think we say in our legislative platform that if the city as a whole is going to take a stance, it has to fit within that, and then we will send that. But I think having those conversations as you will meet or are out and about is exactly what you guys do as our city council.
I think in general, certainly the council has repeatedly in conversations on items addressed its frustration with those kind of things that the state imposes on us. So from my perspective, more power to you. I know you have a closer relationship with some of our state elected representatives than some of the others of us on council. So I would certainly welcome you to do that.
The more pages that can go in the trash, the better.
Yeah. So thank you. Okay. With that, seeing nothing else, we will adjourn.